ina ga sai ya fita ya shafa ina san ga abin ya fara ba da ba shi ina san ga ya fara da shi da ba shi
That was God. Students affairs. Now I would like to invite the Vice Chancellor.
Of the Board of Trustees of Al-Alam University, Katsina, and the Professor of Law. Distinguished Vice Chancellors and heads of tertiary institutions present with us here, Deputy Vice Chancellors and other members of the management of Al-Alam University, Katsina, Deans, Directors, Heads of Departments, academics, staff and students of Al-Alam University, Katsina, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is with immense pleasure that I stand before you today to welcome you to the first in the series of our distinguished lectures to be hosted economic issues, whose voice has defined the issues in Nigeria, in Africa, and in the rest of the world, who will be speaking to us today on a very important topic, Africa in world history, and the place of Africa in the future as a globe, in completing history and anticipating the future. I will not say much. The only work I have to do now is to welcome all of you and to request you to pay attention to an issue that deserves your intellectual concentration. As a young man in the mid-80s, when I was doing my A-level, I had the opportunity to study African history and world contemporary history. And I know that some of the difficulties Africa generally and Nigeria in particular is facing is a lack of knowledge concerning our history, as a result of which we are able to make informed choices and take informed decisions with respect to our politics, to our economy, to our family and other social systems, and even in terms of the relationships that define our existence within Nigeria, the rest of Africa, and the globe. If you pay attention today, I'm sure that Dr. Usman Bugaje will take you into a very elucidative journey of Africa in its history and what Africa and Africans should be doing within the continent and in relation to the rest of the world as we prepare to take up our own destinies in our own hands into the future. So I expect that our visitors and our academic community will these lectures. In fact, the quality of the presentation will depend on the quality of questions and responses that the audience puts to him, and I hope that he will live up to expectations. Thank you very much for coming, and I wish you a very fruitful program this morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Thank you, sir. That was the welcoming address by the Vice Chancellor, Al-Qalam University, Katsina, Professor Nasiru Musa Yaru. At this junction, I would like to invite Dr. Abdullahi Muhammad Megari to read the citation of the university, of the presenter, of the lecture presenter. Thank you. Sir, please can you come over to stand for the citation reading?
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to start on the existing established protocol by my Vice Chancellor. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Standing before you is Dr. Usman Muhammad Bugadi, who was born in September 1951. He's a luminary of West Africa, focusing on the tradition of Tajweed in Western Bilad Sudan from the same institution. He is a recognized scholar across the globe in African history, particularly in Black history. Dr. Usman Bugadi worked with IAIO and taught at the Abbas Bello University Zaria and the University of Maiduguri. He is a prolific writer on national and international issues, and he has published both academic and non-academic journals and other media. He served as a special assistant on political affairs to the Nigerian Vice President Atiku Abubakar from 1999 to 2003. He was elected and represented the good people of Jibia, Keita Federal Constituency at the Federal House of Representatives from 2003 to 2007. Dr. Bugadi is an author of numerous books and published in World Muslim Books Review and wide range of issues regarding the Usman Bugadi. I look forward to a stimulating and enlightening discourse as the first presenter of distinguished lecture series of this prestigious university, Al-Qalam University, Katsina. You are welcome, sir.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي خلقني وهو يهديني، والذي هو يطعمني ويسقيني، وإذا مرضت فهو يشفيني، والذي يميتني ثم يحييني، والذي أطمع أن يغفر لخطيئتي يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا الله نحمده حق حمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن دعا بدعوته إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. The chairman of Sun Foundation, Yasanda, the vice chancellor, very distinguished officials of the university, Professor Ibrahim Sada, very distinguished visitors, very distinguished students. My pleasure. Is it better now? Yes. Thank you. It's my pleasure to make time to discuss what I think is a very important issue. I had opportunity to discuss this topic last year in Kampala, later in Nairobi, and the same year also in South Africa. And I found a lot of positive response. So I said to myself, I should come back home and raise this important issue so that our young people will be conscious and prepare for the future. It is not usual in our circles here in Nigeria today to think of 25 years, 50 years ahead. Because when we look up at our leaders, politicians don't think beyond 4 years of election cycle. Very few of them might, if they are lucky to have had a good training, good education. But most of them, their focus is the next election. And you remember the statement made about the fact that they say politicians only look forward to the next election. It is statesmen that look forward to the next generation. And the more responsible thing for leaders is start thinking of the next generation. And I hope a number of the faculty are here. You as teachers, you should be preparing your students for their own times, which is the next 25 years, not your own time. And this is what Sayyidina Ali said. He was famous of saying that when you prepare your young people, prepare them for their own time, not your own time. So this is why we have to be constantly thinking of the future. And I wish I could start this lecture by asking question as to what do you think the next 25 years is going to be? Now, I'm not asking you to predict the future, nobody can do that, right? But you do projections. Projections would allow you to see what is the likely scenario, what are the likely things. Because this is the science of the future that the whole world uses to plan. So if you want to plan, you have to plan for the future. So I want you to go back to your seat, then I can start talking. Then I know that things are going to. Thank you. You see, if we do not envisage and anticipate the future, technically we cannot even plan. Because what are you planning for? You're planning for something, right? Maybe I give you a small example. Nigeria at the moment is well over 250 million in terms of population, right? If you look at the United Nations projection, and this projection is scientific, it's not just arbitrary, no. It's based on a scientific formula, you know, based on rate of birth or population growth. You multiply it over the number of years. Now, Nigeria in 2030, which is 4 years from now, is expected to be 300 million. This one will be their mid-career. Nigeria is expected to be 411, in some calculations, 425 million, which will make Nigeria the third largest country in population after India and China. Now, what does that mean to leaders? It is now they will start planning. How do we build sufficient schools for this population? How do we build hospitals for this population? How do we provide housing for this population? How do we provide the infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, the internet? How do we? But because we do not even contemplate, we don't sit and read and see, this is the projection, we don't plan. The typical politician, whether he's a governor or he's a member of the House or State Assembly, if you ask him, what are you planning for the next 10, 20 years? Most of them have no idea. I live with them, so if you want to, I'm giving you free information. They have no idea. They don't discuss the future. They are just thinking, how do they plan to win the next election? And when they win, how do they steal as much money as possible to ensure that they win the next election? And then how do they also make sure that they continue on that seat? So the point is, I hope I'm not stressing it too far. I want you to understand why we need to understand and plan for the future. But before you plan for the future, you need to understand the past. The past is critical in your understanding of the future. Without the past, you cannot actually explain the present and you cannot anticipate the future. And this is why history is very important. Some of you from the citation, you have heard that I graduated from pharmacy. I worked in the hospital, taught in the university, but I decided to go back and read our own history. Why? It was tough, because if you have a science background, to go back and start postgrad in social sciences is quite tough. And I invite some of you to do so, because it's very important. Now, when we were in secondary school, and Bilia is here to testify, we were not taught anything about our own history. We were taught about the history of Europeans who came here, Mongopa, Mary Salesa, and all these others. We were taught about the history of the Spanish and Portuguese in Latin America. We were told about Columbus, we were told about so many things, but we were not taught about our own history. There was nothing about the Sokoto Caliphate. There was nothing about Sheikh Usman Danfodio. There was nothing at all. By the time we got to the university, because of the environment in the university, allows you to learn beyond the subjects you are there to learn. You get public lectures, you get so many other ways, and that's why the university education is important. It's universal. That's what you mean by university. You are going to look for. They said no. They said the three of them have written over 300 books. We have never been told about any one of them. So, I mean, that was the shock that we received in the university. And we took the decision that we are going to have to write our own universities, our own history. Why did we have to leave our field to go and study? Because I hope we are listening, because I can hear murmurings. I'm not used to this kind of environment, and so please do excuse me. I'm more familiar with a very serious setting. If somebody is interested in talking, my suggestion is that he leaves the room, goes out, finishes talking, and then comes back. There is no point you sit here, you are talking while somebody is speaking. And please, people distribute water. Can you kindly stop? In the environment I grow and in the places I go around the world, people don't do that. So please, if you want to give water, give it before people sit. Or wait, put it somewhere. People will walk quietly, pick their water, come to their seat and drink it without disturbing anybody. I'm sorry if I have to, but this is home. Katsina ce saboda haka in na ga abin da ba daidai ba tilasta muku magana. Ba a yi haka a duniya. Duk inda ka je inda ake yin abubuwa na kirki na abin da ba a labari in za ka yi ko amsa waya sai ka fita ka amsa waya ka yi labarin ka in ka shigo sai ka nutsu sai ka saurara in kana da uzuri sai ka tafi daga baya ka ji ko ka karanta. But please, when you are here, don't disrupt what other people are listening to. So coming back to the point, we asked our colleagues in the history department to talk to us or tell us or write about our history. We discovered they themselves did not know. What they knew is what the Europeans taught them. And we now knew that we have our history, which the Europeans didn't like us to know. And so for me, that was the starting point that I left my work in the university teaching pharmacy and went to the Sudan and did a master's in a comparative history between the movement of Usman Danfodio and that of Muhammad al-Mahdi in the Sudan. I came back, taught a little for about 3 years or so or thereabouts, went back to study intellectual history. And after or in the process of studying intellectual history, I moved into Europe because Muslims moved into Europe and they ruled Europe for 500 years in Spain. And that got me interested in European intellectual history. And because of that, it has completely changed my perspective of the world. It has given me the self-esteem that I don't see any European, any Western sciences or this as anything superior. Because everything the West claims to be good at, its roots is Islamic. And I can contest anything, just think of any area that you think the West is good at, I can trace that knowledge to Muslim scholars who taught it. The most mesmerizing of the work of the West now is AI, isn't it? I'm sure there are many people here, even if you don't study computer science, you do AI, isn't it? I mean, you understand AI and you use it. AI is based on algorithm, and algorithm was who lived in about the 8th century. And the word algorithm is actually the Latin form of al-Khawarizmi. So everything. So let me come back to my subject because I've taken way off to prepare your mind for what I'm going to. I have with me a synopsis which I'm going to go through. I reckon that if I'm going to put the paper together later, it's going to come to about 30 pages. So, but I have about 9 pages here that I'm going to go through, which is for me the synopsis. There is an echo. Can somebody help us? Now, for everything you want to start, and this I'm sure you're being taught in the university, you start with the rationale. Why do we want to discuss this topic? So, why do we study this subject? Why do we study history? Why does it matter if we do or we don't? These are questions I don't know what's happening to the mic. Okay, I can use this mic. You can put away the rest. So it's important we start with the rationale so that we understand why we are doing what we are doing. So these are questions that are answered by what is called the philosophy of history. It's the philosophy of history that attends to these questions. It was the first to coin the term philosophy of history, which, like many Western claims, is not true. Now, if you go to the internet, you ask philosophy of history, they will bring Voltaire. It's not true because Voltaire lived between 1694 to 1780 during the beginning of the Enlightenment period. While Ibn Khaldun lived from 1332 to 1406. He lived during the beginning of the Renaissance. Now, European history, you can put it in three main phases: the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment period. The Dark Ages is from the Roman period up to the, if you like, 13th century. Europe itself wrote its history and said these were the Dark Ages of Europe. Europe was in the dark. And then came the Renaissance. Renaissance started from the 14th through the 15th and the 16th century. This is the period of the Renaissance in Europe. And then you have the Enlightenment period starting from the 17th, 18th through the 19th century. Now these are the major. So Voltaire was what is So I want you to understand that Europe was sometimes in the Dark Ages. Then it went into the Renaissance. Renaissance is like the reawakening of Europe. And then from Renaissance they moved into the time of Enlightenment. Maybe I should say a few things about this so that when I make reference to Enlightenment you can understand. Europe was in the Dark Ages. Many of them were not literate. They were unclean. They were in the Dark Ages. Then came the Renaissance. How did the Renaissance start? It started, like I said, in the 14th century from a city in Italy called Florence. Florence is in the northern part of Italy. As if you are going to the Switzerland. Around, I make reference to them. I just want you to understand we have an idea of the map and the geography. Renaissance was a reawakening that was started by the Muslims. It was the Muslim scholars who went into Spain in the 11th century, established universities, established centers of learning. These were the people who awakened Europe, and they started reawakening called the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was the period when science blossomed in Europe. And Europe started catching up with the Muslim world. And when Europe became educated, they threw away Christianity. And that was the beginning of the Enlightenment. Unfortunately, they threw away the baby with the bathwater because their opposition to Christianity went to a point where they felt they did not even need God. And there was a debate during the period of Enlightenment as to whether God really exists or not. And there was a debate, and these books are there. There were debates over whether God is relevant or not, even if he exists. At the end of the Enlightenment period, in the 19th century, there was a German philosopher called Nietzsche, who actually declared God was dead. So if you check Friedrich Nietzsche, you will see that he is famous for that declaration. And that's why Europe, and consequently the West, became secular. This idea of secularism is a Western idea. We have nothing to do with it. We didn't suffer the problems that Europe suffered. And this is why, and even at that, secularism is a difficult concept even in Europe, even in America. Because if you say you don't have anything to do with God, take Britain for example. The king or the queen, whichever way it is in England, is always the head of the government of England up till now. But the king or the queen is also the head of the Anglican Church. So how do you really separate the two? Take any dollar bill, any dollar currency. In God we trust. So what brought God on the dollar bill if you don't really think is relevant? So these are problems which you have to sort out. So that don't allow anybody to tell you Nigeria is a secular state. Nigeria is not a secular state. Nigeria is a multi-religious state. If you check the Nigerian constitution, you will not see the word secular at all. But carelessly people say, oh, we're in a secular state. Okay, who made it secular? When? How? Where is it written? So Nigeria is a multi-religious state, meaning there are many religions, and there is a clause in the constitution that says no one particular religion will be adopted as state religion. Now that's a different matter. It's just saying that we are a plural society. So Nigeria is secular. So when some stupid fellow tells you that Nigeria is secular, both the head of government and also the head of the church. So where is the separation now? The same. So let's get a few things clear. So I was making reference to the fact that we need to understand why we study this subject. And like I said, if you check the internet, they will tell you that Voltaire was the person who started the idea of philosophy of history. But you can see clearly Voltaire came 300 years after Ibn Khaldun. It was Ibn Khaldun who first studied or started the philosophy of history, and he wrote a book, a famous book called Kitab al-Ibar, the book of lessons, 7 volumes. The introduction alone, which is called the Muqaddimah, comes in a total of 681 pages. This is just the introduction. It gives us our identities. It is what explains our culture and our values. Without history, we could not figure out what life is all about, and we would have learned nothing, and we would have repeated all the mistakes of mankind, and would have been doomed to fail. For Muslims, this comes very clearly from the Quran. If you go to Surah Ibrahim, verse number 5, it's a very, very important verse that I want us to study. Allah is talking about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. He's talking about we have sent Sayyidina Musa بآياتنا أن أخرج قومك من الظلمات إلى النور وذكرهم بأيام الله إن في ذلك لآية لكل صبار شكور. Now here, anytime you find Sayyidina Musa mentioned, it's a reference to political tyranny, political injustice, because that's what Sayyidina Musa came to fight the Fir'aun for. And this expression, it has come in a number of places of the Quran, taking people away from the darkness the light. We made reference to Europe being in dark ages. It was Islam that brought it into the light of the nations. So the point here is these messages are supposed to take us away from darkness into light. And that's what history actually does. It takes you away from darkness and brings you into light. And Allah made reference to Ayyamillah. Ayyamillah is nothing but this history. And what did it say? It is full of those lessons for those who are patient and those who are grateful. So, when we don't spend too much, we have your ulama who can. In fact, if you look at the Quran and you do a content analysis of the Quran, you find that nearly half of the Quran is full of history. The history of the prophets that will be narrated to the Prophet and narrated to the Ummah, so that we have a compendium of the history of civilization from the time of Adam alayhi salam to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. All the prophets that came, not everything has been put, but the major things that Allah wants us to know. So that history, and when these narrations are done, sometimes the Quran informs the Prophet ﷺ that we are giving you all this for Adam, so that you will have a rest of mind, contentment, confidence, so that you can now know these are the rules of life, these are the lessons of life, and you'll be properly guided and you'll be successful. Now, there are other things about history I want to stop here. Whenever the paper is ready, or even the synopsis, you will be able to catch up with that. The synopsis has a lot of online references, and it's made deliberately so that when eventually students get copies, they can now go back to this online, because you can do that with your telephone once you have data, and you can read them. You don't have to go looking for a book in the library, which you may not find anyway. So this is something we follow up with. Now, I've taken 12, I'm not sure if we can cover all the 12. I've taken 12 incidences where people of African origin or African states or polities played a critical role, or people of African descent played a critical role in the history of the world. The incidences are not, but of course we are limited in the time. And let me start from before the birth of Isa alayhi salam, the period that is called the BC, before Christ. Africa hosted an empire called the Carthaginian Empire. The capital was in Tunis, which is the capital of current Tunisia. And these Carthaginians were contemporaries of the Roman Empire. They shared the Mediterranean Sea. And there were times when they went into conflict, either because of sharing of resources or the kind of thing that make nations go to war. So one of the leaders of the Carthaginians, called Hannibal, went into Europe with elephants. He conquered a number of European countries and went into Rome, which was the greatest, it was the superpower at that time, and conquered Rome. Because Rome was, at that particular period, was a tyrant. It was creating a lot of injustices. So Hannibal went and conquered Rome. And this is something in history that has never been repeated, meaning taking animals, elephant, big as it is, across the Mediterranean, and climbing mountains and coming down and, conquering that powerful superpower called Rome at that particular time. So I said this is something, and this happened between 217 to 211 BC. It's called the Second Punic War. There are a number of wars, as you know, between different countries in Europe. So it's important, and I've made reference to it so that I don't spend too much time. That changed the course of history, but it checked Rome, and it created new alliances. The consequences of this war are still here with us. And this is why we need to register this as one of those contributions that Africa did to world history. The second one is that later, after a number of centuries, there were times when Rome acquired provinces in Africa. And what that meant is that Africans will now go to Rome and they will now become officials of the Roman Empire. And eventually, Rome produced emperors who are of African origin. And one of them in particular, called Septimius Severus, who lived between 193 who was emperor between 193 AD, this time after Christ, to 211, is an African emperor. Why is he important? Because Septimius Severus did something which the British will never forget. At the end of the end of the 2nd century and beginning of the 3rd century, England faced a very serious security challenge, worse than the challenges that we are facing now. And they did all they could and they could not solve the problem. They got support from their neighboring countries, they could not solve the problem. So they appealed to Rome, which was the strongest empire at that time. And the emperor was this Septimius Severus, who is an African, but who became the emperor of Rome of that particular time. It was Septimius Severus that came to England and went to the northern part of England around the Caledonian tribes and conquered those tribes and gave England the peace. So when you go to British Museum today, one of the busts, the small, if you like, the heads that they create, the artists create of people that are significant in their history, the first bust you see is that of Septimius Severus. I have made a number of references here, which I would like to skip. When you get the paper, you read it with all the online references. He was born, Septimius Severus was born in Leptis Magna, which is in Libya today, in the Roman provinces of Africa. As a young man, he advanced through the customary succession of offices under the reign of Marcus Aurelius and the commanders. You see this in, easily get all these details from Wikipedia. Now maybe I should also clarify, when we speak of Libya, we speak of Tunisia, we speak of Algeria, we'll soon be speaking of Algeria or Morocco. Most people today will say these are Arab countries, isn't it? But these are not Arab countries, they are Arabized countries. And up till now they have their local languages that they are still using in their villages. So these countries in Africa were not Arabs. They are still not Arabs technically, because they still have their own language. So sometimes when I make reference to this, they are Africans, and Africa is an amalgam of different types of skin colors, different types of languages, but they are united by that common existence within Africa. And there are a number of ways they mixed and traded with each other and you find people from Senegal moving up to Ethiopia, you find people in South Africa, over time in history, we have moved in different directions and mixed and lost our languages, sometimes we pick these other cultures. This is what, history teaches us. So I should make that clarification. The next significant incident is that of St. Augustine. If you ask Christians, one of their most revered saints is St. Augustine. St. Augustine is called St. Augustine of Hippo. Hippo is his hometown, which is today called Anafba, and is in Algeria. What did he do? He lived between, I think, 350, read a lot of the Greek works. Rome did not accept Christianity until I think the 2nd or the 3rd century after Christ. And when it accepted Christianity, it became the Holy Roman Empire that you may have read about in history. When it became the Holy Roman Empire, it became the custodian of the Christianity, and they were like the leaders and the protectors, but they were all Catholic at that time. It was later we had these different divisions of churches. And Rome was protecting Christianity. But the problem, when Rome converted, they now took all the Greek works, the work of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Seneca, all these great Greek philosophers. They burned them. They said this is the works of pagans, because they had no God. They were not believers of Christ or any as such. Therefore they burned these works, and then they started their own theology, and then they ran into a problem. Christianity was not progressing, and there were a lot of problems that they could not answer. It was this St. Augustine of Hippo who has read a lot of the Greek works. He was an expert in Greek philosophy who later converted to Christianity. I remember that time that was the Islam, because I was not Islam at that point in time. I mean, the Prophet Muhammad came some 300-400 years later, right? So that was the message of Isa alayhi salam. So this St. Augustine converted to Christianity, and then he looked at Christian theology, and he had his knowledge of Greek philosophy. So he now synthesized and reconciled the two opposing or seemingly opposing ideas. And because of that synthesis, he was invited to Rome, the capital of Christianity, to teach rhetorics and to be able to solve the problem. And I think Wikipedia says, they said that he is generally regarded as one of the most influential philosophers in the history of the Western world. And he is viewed as one of the most important figure in the church. He was born in 350 in it's now called the Souk Ahra in Algeria. So we read more about it. Now this work that St. Augustine did was critical to the history of Christianity. If he did not intervene at that period of time, perhaps Christianity would have died, because it was suffocating. He breathed life into it by reconciling these seemingly opposing ideas. And the West appreciates him. As I said in Wikipedia, he is regarded as the most influential philosophers in the history of the Western world. And he's from Africa. So he served the world in history in this particular way. The details You will read when you get the synopsis. We move to the fourth incident, which I'm sure as university people will find very interesting. Even as I'm talking, those of you with your telephones and if your data, just Google, ask Google, which is the first university in the world? Google will tell you it is the University of Qarawiyyin, which is in Fez, in Morocco, that was established in 859. This is the first university in the world. The second university in the world is not in the West. It's in fact of Al-Azhar, the famous Al-Azhar, which was built in 970 to 975. The third university in the world, again, is not in Europe or the West. It was the University of Sankore in Timbuktu that was built in 989. The probably the fifth university in the world is the one in Bologna, in Italy. The Bologna, I made the reference to when I was speaking about the intellectual history of Europe, which was built in 1088. You will see that it's over 200 years after the Muslims had already started. And that University of Bologna in 1088 was inspired by the Almoravids that went into Spain and established in southern, nearly half of the south of Spain, the polity of Andalus, which was ruled by Muslims, because they were there a few decades. So people were coming to Andalus, just like a few people were going to Dubai, a few years back, as one fascinating place to go, with the tall buildings, miracle lights, and so many things. And they were like, if we go from Nigeria, we'll be enjoying the buildings and, taking delight in the different colors and the development. That was how Europeans were coming to that Andalus, and they were inspired by its scholars, its schools, and they were students. That's how they went back and established that university. I have seen some clips, which I hope some of you have seen, to the effect that because, maybe I should read this small portion, which says that the third university in the world is the University of Sankore. The fourth university is that of Bologna, and the curriculum that was taught in Qarawiyyin University was not just the religious curriculum. No. Unlike early European institutions that focused primarily on theology, Al-Qarawiyyin offered a broad education covering the Quran, Islamic jurisprudence, grammar, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and history. You get the references and you can read more about it. The point I want to make here is that when Europe started their universities, they started them as seminaries. Yes, they were issuing certificates. They were but they were seminaries. It was much later when they actually started to teach other subjects. I've not put it here, but I hope I will put it later. But you can again check it online. In Nigeria, I think the most prestigious universities of Europe is the Cambridge and the Oxford, isn't it? Even in England, these are the first league of the universities. In terms of ranking, they are perhaps the highest, right? So, if you look at the history of these universities, they started about the 13th century just as Europe was beginning the Renaissance. But they remained seminaries until the 17th century. And when they started to convert to a regular university and to bring in mathematics, science and technology and medicine, the first department they opened when they were doing that transition was the department. The textbooks that they were going to were all in Arabic. Arabic in Europe was the language of scholarship. So these things had to be translated. And I'm sure you may have read the Canon of Medicine of Ibn Sina was taught until the end of the 19th century as the major textbook in medicine. And it was translated from the Arabic. Al-Qanun fi Tibb, and that was the equivalent of the English translation, the Canon of Medicine. So these things are important for you to know. There is a book, I've not put the reference, I hope when I complete I'll put the reference. A Christian Palestinian by the name George Makdisi. He did a PhD in the establishment of universities in the East, meaning in the Muslim world, and in the West. And he wrote, he published it as a book. And it's interesting in this book, you find very amazing revelations that even until I think the 17th century or thereabouts, certainly in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, all the scholars in Europe have to learn. In fact, if scholars come and they do not speak a word of Arabic, they are not considered as being educated at all at that time. And we discovered that the statute that established these universities in the West, it was copied word by word from the statutes of the Muslim universities. And he brought samples and he compared them. So you can see a lot of influence of the Arabian. The thing I wanted to remember, I saw a clip which I was quite happy. When you do convocation, you remember your convocation gowns, right? It's like you have a cap and there's a flat surface at the top, isn't it? Where do you think this came from? I mean, we got them from the Europeans that established our universities, isn't it? But actually the Europeans got it from Qarawiyyin University. And Qarawiyyin University, when you graduate, you are given ijaza. That cap is called Fez cap. The one with the small tarbush, right? And what they used to do is that they wear that Fez cap and then they put Quran on the top of their head to take an oath to be faithful in teaching what we have learned. That was the graduation ceremony. And that's how we got this. And they wear a gown, very similar. Of course, they have now incorporated it and created spaces there. But I mean, the original one was quite complete kaftan, and with this face cap, with the Quran, that was the picture. And that's what Europe picked. And that's what you find if you go to Harvard University in the United States. So you need to understand this. And even the BSc, Bachelors of Arts or Bachelors of Science, if you leave the English language, you look at the equivalent of bachelors in Latin or in Italian or Spanish, they will say baccalaureus. Now, baccalaureus again is from Arabic. It is a Latin or European language rendering of what they write when they give the ijaza. They have a riwayah, that you have now the permission to do riwayah of what you have read. The ijaza will say that Fulan, your name, is now permitted to teach this subject. I, as his teacher, I have certified that he is qualified to teach this book or to teach this subject. So a lot of these things, I don't want to get into details. Let's move to the fifth contribution, and that is the Al-Murabitun movement. This is the movement which went into Spain. This movement was actually started from Tunis. Qayrawan, don't confuse it with Qarawiyyin. Qayrawan is a big city in Tunis. Some of the Sahaba, after the wafat of the Prophet ﷺ, moved to Tunis and they established a school. And all these books we read, like the Risala. The Risala is that of Abu Zayd ibn al-Qayrawan, a reference to his nasba of Qayrawan. And it is Abdullah ibn Yasin from the Sanhaja tribe that went to study in Qayrawan. He came back to Sanhaja, which is the area of about Mauritania today, and he started schools, and that school blossomed and it became a movement. It is that movement that split into two. One moved into the area of what is called Obergast. Obergast is like southern Mauritania, and that is the old Ghana Empire. And that was where Islam started in West Africa. And then later on, we had the Mali Empire, and later on we had the Songhai Empire. And after about 2 centuries, and of course we had Borno in Central Africa, but at the same time, and then came the Sokoto Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. So the point is, this movement changed the history of Europe. You can see that there is no contribution like it to Europe. Because the Almoravids went into Spain. In fact, their initial capital was actually in Marrakesh. Marrakesh is in Morocco. But later on, they moved it to Cordoba. And there were lots of other smaller villages within the Andalus. And many great Muslim scholars were actually European scholars, if you like. In the Mawlud period, we usually read a book called Ashafa. Many people know this book, Ashafa book. Ashafa is actually Ashifa. It's the title of the book that Qadi Iyad. Nan da Hausa muna ce Al-Qadi Iyad. Ashafa ta Al-Qadi Iyad, haka da malamin mu na gida za ku ji suna magana. So, Al-Qadi Iyad is one of the famous scholars of Andalus. We have Ibn Rushd, both the philosopher and the faqih, who wrote Bidayat al-Mujtahid wa Nihayat al-Muqtasid. He is also an Andalusian scholar. Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri is also an Andalusian scholar. So a lot of the big scholars whose books we read and were actually European, but they moved from Africa, they went into Europe, and they established an Islamic scholarship, Islamic civilization, and they awoke Europe from its sleeping, from its slumber, and Europe started reawakening, called the Renaissance. And that is how the Almoravids changed the history of Europe and changed the history of the world. So it's Africa now in world history that is giving the world that particular shape and direction. I now move to I come back to England, I would say. In the 16th century, King Henry VIII was the King of England. He was the father of Queen Elizabeth I. King Henry was under the suzerainty of the Roman Empire. And like every European state at that time, and they were all practicing Catholicism. And in Catholicism, you can have only one wife, and you cannot, I think even if there is divorce, you cannot marry. There are a lot of protocols. He had a problem, I think, medical with his wife, and he wanted to have another wife. So he had to go to the Pope to give him special permission. So it took a lot of hassle. Eventually the Pope permitted him to take another wife. So he took another wife. After some time, he said, well, if I've gotten permission to take another wife, I might as well take another wife. So he went back to the Pope. This time the Pope said no. And the king said, look, wait a minute. Why do I need to go to the Pope? So he just took a decision that he would cut off from Catholicism in Europe and start his own church. That was the beginning of the Anglican Church. So if you had any friend who is Anglican, ask him about the history of the Anglican Church. It was King Henry VIII who started. He broke away from Rome. But then there are consequences because Rome was very powerful. So when he broke away, Rome excommunicated England. What does that mean? It means England cannot trade with any European nation, they cannot sign any defense pact, they cannot get any support, they will be on their own, they will be vulnerable, they can be crushed by any power, they don't have food, they don't, because it's very, very serious. It's like the whole world is under sanction. You cannot survive. Now which countries came to help England survive? It was Morocco and the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was already trading in metal. Because the Ottoman Empire was in the 16th century. Remember, it's one of the greatest empires in Europe. And they went into Eastern Europe, they established Islam in Bosnia, in Yugoslavia, in a lot of what they call the Asian East Asian countries. So, Morocco supplied the food, especially sugar, and because of that, the Moroccan ambassador was the doing of the diplomatic corps. He was like the head of all the ambassadors. And he lived in an area in London called France. And he was the neighbor, immediate neighbor of William Shakespeare, the great writer. And I don't know if I think we have mentioned one of the greatest works of Shakespeare is the only work, the only book that appears as a black man called Othello. So check with your literature friends, Othello is one of the greatest works. Now what is interesting about Othello, if you look at the book, you see a painting of a black man wearing some non-European dress with the kind of what we call here Palmaran. Dr. Bilia always wears that, I remember, when we used to. Now that was actually the painting of the Moroccan ambassador. And Shakespeare was influenced in many ways by that Moroccan ambassador. And if you read the literature of Shakespeare and the stories he has written, you will come across stories that are exact stories in the Muslim literature, like the story of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, the famous story of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. Shakespeare brought it without any mention of Abu Dharr. Maybe you forgot who it is, but he brought the story verbatim as you find it in Islamic literature. Where did he get it? How did I, in fact, come across this? I was in London and I attended a lecture of a professor of the religion from the Oxford University who came, and he was the one who first introduced me to this idea that Othello, which is the best play of Shakespeare, which is the only play in which a black man featured, and which has the painting of that black man in that painting has now been discovered to be exactly the painting of the Moroccan ambassador to England at that particular time. So you can see the depth of influence of Africa in European and therefore world history. What is it that I need to say about this? open. You also see a painting. There are paintings of Elizabeth I with people bringing to her a gift of the Quran from the King of Morocco. And these paintings you find in the British Museum. They are very, very, because Morocco was the savior of England at that particular time. They never forget it. They have documented it. Paintings have documented it. Works, poetry, so many things have documented it. It's a very significant time or milestone in their history. Then we now come to Columbus. All of us were told Columbus discovered America, isn't it? Again, it's not true. It's not true at all. Americans have been trading with Africans. Morocco was the world sea power at the time Columbus was trying to get to America. And if I remember correctly, Columbus was being put across to us as someone who is generous, going for a kind of scientific inquiry, a great man, trying to explore the world, but Columbus was just a businessman. If you go back to the treaties he signed, he went to the King of Portugal. He refused to offer. The offer of Columbus to give him money to travel, because there are treasures he has learned. There is a lot of wealth in this direction, and that he wants to now go with ships and this and bring that wealth to Europe. It was always Spain that agreed, and they signed a contract with him. Okay, Columbus, we are going to give you ship, we are going to give you this money and all this, and whatever you bring, we will take 60-40 or some kind of fraction. You take this, we will get this. Both the king and the queen of Spain were shareholders in the business of Columbus. In fact, part of the agreement is that whichever people he found, if he is able to subdue them or get the intelligence, they will send Spanish soldiers to conquer and keep that, and the citizens, or rather the people of that island or wherever it is, will now become citizens of Spain, meaning it's like becoming a colony of Spain. So when Columbus in his second trip sent Isabella, the queen of 7,500 slaves, she took them back. She said, I did ask you to bring slaves to me. What I want you to do is to convert these people to become Spanish citizens, and then we can now use them to grow food, to do so many things for us, free, cheap labor. That's what she wanted. So if you look at the thing, and it's on record that Columbus actually used Moroccan sailors because he didn't know the way. And when you go to Morocco, you find that there are Moroccan history has documented their trade with America 300, 400, 500 years before Columbus. They know the route, they know the people. In fact, when you go to the coast of America, historians up to recently were discovering coins, hidden as treasures. These are Moroccan coins coming for traders who were coming to trade, with America at that time. So he didn't discover anything. It's just one of the lies that Europeans tell, and he was simply, in fact, I didn't have the reference here. I hope I will find it, and then the actual agreement, when he started with bumping into the island of Bahamas, and then from Bahamas he got to know more about America, and then he eventually went to America. And the agreement was actually written, the secretary who did was a Moroccan called Abdurrahman. I'm not able to pinpoint the reference, which if I do I will be able to share. But the point is, Columbus did not. It was the Moroccans who actually took him there. So again, this is Africa playing a very important role in world history. I come back to now incident number 8. I hope you are not tired. Okay. We have all recently with the corona, we had to do a lot of things about, read a lot of things about immunization, isn't it, vaccinations. In 1716, there was, no, wait a minute. Yeah, in the beginning of the 17th century, or actually 18th century, there was a massive smallpox outbreak in Massachusetts, in Boston in particular. Boston is the city. That's where Harvard University is. Harvard University is in outskirts of Boston, a place called Cambridge. So when this smallpox broke out, people were dying. Then the Americans didn't know what to do. So it was a West African slave who talked to his master. He said, look, these people dying. There are ways to stop this. He said, how? He said, take a portion of the pus of an infected person, attenuate it so that it cannot harm you, but is still alive, inject it in the body of the patient. It will provoke an antibody reaction that will now immunize and protect that person who has not already been infected. So that was the beginning of vaccination. And it was Johnson & Johnson, the company that sells baby oil and others, that actually took this knowledge and turned it into a big fortune without any reference to that West African slave who actually, has the intellectual property of that particular thing. So again, this is Africa playing a role in world history. Of course, from there, vaccination was done and so many other things. In Europe, the idea of vaccination was picked up from Turkey, from the Ottoman Empire. But you can see here in the context of America, it was a black slave who did that. The other incident is the American independence. You know, America was a colony of Britain at some stage, and they fought Britain and secured their independence. The famous Thomas Jefferson, who was one time an American president, was the secretary of the 5-man committee that wrote the Declaration of American Independence in 1776. Thomas Jefferson, there is a lot that we say about Thomas Jefferson, but the point here is that when America declared its independence, it was waiting for support from other countries. And the first country that recognized American independence was Morocco. And Morocco's recognition is what gave life to America. Because other Europeans were not ready because they would be in trouble with England. Or maybe there was a pact. So that recognition by Morocco, an African country, was critical. And it was in 1786, about 10 years later, that Morocco and the United States formalized this recognition by signing the Moroccan-American Treaty of Friendship, which stands as the longest unbroken treaty in U.S. history. So for details of this, I've made reference where you can go and read more about it. The significant point here is that America would not have become an independent country but for the recognition of Morocco, an African country. And I understand until now, maybe until recently, since that time, no Moroccan requires a visa to go into America. If you are Moroccan, you don't need visa because of that critical role that Morocco played to the life of America. Now, still in America, let's go to Washington. I'm sure not many of you have been to Washington. Washington is a very interesting city. It was built during the presidency of George Washington. Thomas Jefferson was still alive. And when they took a decision to build a capital for the United States, they chose Washington. It was a land that was like barren or vacant, and they invited a French architectural company to now design the capital for them. The French company came, they did their surveys, they did their design. Somewhere in the process before the building started, they disagreed with the Americans. And they collected their papers and design and everything, and they entered the ship and they went back to France. So America was stranded. They didn't know what to do. What happened? There was a black man who was an architect, was a free black by name Benjamin Banneker. Now they change their names when they come from Africa. They give them there. So you may have been some Muhammad Ahmad, you never know. Sometimes you get to know because some of them who are ulama, who have written books, they have left manuscripts in Arabic from which we are able to detect their original name and where they came from, and research is still going on, and that's going to be my next point. So Benjamin Banneker has or had a photographic memory. He reproduced all that design that was done with him. From his head, he reproduced the design and he supervised the building of Washington as a capital city. So it was a black man. And up to now, there are, of course, there have been changes in the last few years, but Washington is largely populated by blacks. But they've been pushing them into the periphery with time. I've been to some of those areas where they have been pushing the black population. But I mean, it's a city built by black expertise and black labor. Now, I was checking the history of building of the White House. When you go to the internet, at least the one that I checked, they said White House was written and was built by an Irish architect. I have my doubts, because if you look at what Benjamin Banneker did, it included the building of the White House. And I suspect, like every lies they have been telling, and that I need to confirm, in actual fact, including the White House, it was built by black expertise, by black labor. So you can argue that there is nothing right about the White House except the white paint. It's actually the blacks that did everything. And this is part of the contribution, again, of Africa to world history. We come to slave trade. Many of you must have read that it was William Wilberforce that led the movement to stop slave trade, right? This is what they told us, But when we check, and now evidences have been coming, and I quoted a book here which, I don't know if we have the book, I don't know if it's online, I've not checked because I went through the book before it was published. It was a friend of mine who wrote it. He is from the Caribbean. The book is entitled Islam, Race and Rebellion in the Americas. When you say the Americas, you are talking about North America and South America. That's in literature, when you put an S in America, you are referring to North and South America. What is interesting here is that when the Europeans picked Africans and took them and put them in plantations, and they were producing sugar cane, they were producing all the food, which they now present and then they bring back to Europe. They were doing it, of course, with all the tragedies, and you have seen the film called The Roots, maybe. You have seen the level of cruelty, the level of mercilessness, the terrible things that the Europeans were doing. But it's not just the black. America itself was built on the blood of the red Americans. Some reports said they had killed over 10 million at that time, killing, exterminated by Indians, who were the original owners of that land. So when Christians were reporting Nigeria to Americans for genocide, they did not know that America itself was created through genocide, because the foundations of America were foundations of genocide. But coming back to the point, slave trade was resisted, and there were a series of slave riots from the 18th through the 19th century. Now, these slave riots, it's now clear, and even in my book, The Past as Future, which I hope the Vice Chancellor has copies. If you don't, then remind me. I have a chapter on which I spoke about the impact of the Sokoto Caliphate in the Americas. Not many people know it, but there is mountain evidence today that those who led the slave riots were ulama who were caught during the conflicts, and there were collateral damages, and they were shipped to Europe as slaves. Many of them had memorized the Quran. Many of them had memorized hadith. They had memorized books. So they were able to reproduce those books. In the slave plantation, they opened schools, and they were teaching people. They were having combats. They continued their work as ulama, as du'at, something that they do here, even as slaves. And it was these people who organized the jihad. For them, it is a jihad to free themselves from the cruelty of the slave owners, to free themselves. And there are a series of this, and these are fully documented. Some of the references or evidence are still in Arabic. Many people have done PhDs in this. So Dawood Abdullah, whose title of whose book I read, is one of those who did his PhD on this. Dawood went to study Arabic for I think 2 years also in Saudi Arabia. So when he returned, he could read these manuscripts that were not only was written, and he has a mountain evidence. But it is more interesting. The jihad were 2 of the books of Usman Danfodio. There is a book that Usman Danfodio wrote when he was in Qajar before the Hijrah to Libya. There is a book called Masail al-Muhimma. In this book, Masail al-Muhimma, Shaykh Usman Danfodio said it is sunnah to have a weapon. You cannot be a Muslim and then you do not have any provision for any weapon. And I'm sure many of us are just working like this. We have our Bible and our books. We don't have a weapon. Now Shaykh is telling you that it's sunnah to have a weapon. You have to be armed all the time. Yes, in a very civil society, you can expect this. In that book, they were teaching it, and they were able now to arm themselves and to prepare to free themselves. There is another book called the Wasiqa to Sudan. This Wasiqa to Sudan was written just maybe a year or 2 before the Hijrah, and it was to prepare people for the Hijrah and the Jihad. And so all these books, so they discovered these books were the most influential books in the slave riots that eventually made slavery non-profitable because of the consequences, and they as Europeans have to now find a way of exiting from slavery, and that was what William Wilberforce helped them to do. He was shown as a very generous man, very courteous, very caring, and therefore he wants slavery to stop. But the real antidote to slavery were the ulama who found themselves there, and they were inspired particularly by these two books. The references are overwhelming, and they are there. You can check them. Finally, on the issue of the role of Africa in history, it's a very short thing. I'll just read it. There is a book by Mustafa Briggs called Beyond Bilal. Extracted this from that book. He said in one of the chapters, he started by saying, on February the 14th, 2018, American online media company Business Insider, the go-to for millions interested in the most up-to-date financial news, published their article about the richest person in history. Perhaps to the astonishment of many, it was not Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, but the 14th century West African emperor, Mansa Musa. Subsequent articles followed from other major media powerhouses such as the BBC, the Independent, History.com, the National Geographic, with Smithsonian Magazine, even advertising an exhibition opening at Northwest University's Block Museum exploring Mansa Musa's legacy. Now, what does this tell us? It's basically saying, up till now, the richest person in history is still an African, Mansa Musa. If you read about his journey to Hajj, you will see that Mansa Musa, when he moved to Egypt on his way to Hajj, the world price of gold fell because of the large quantity of gold that he brought with him, and he was very generous. And some said he went with some historical figures, some historical sources were giving figures as much as 60,000 people in his entourage. So it was quite a phenomenon. Now let me come to the issue of the future now. What's the role of Africa in the future? We are now looking at projections. We are not predicting the future. Nobody can predict the future. But we can do projections and understand or anticipate what is coming and prepare for it. Now, I just picked 5 points that I hope I can cover very quickly. And this, we start with demographics like I started. At the moment the world, I think, is about 8.3 billion, the total world population, and Africa is just about 1.5 billion in this 8.3. In 2050, Africa will almost double its population, which will be about 2.5 billion. Now what is interesting is that Africa has the fastest growing population in the world. That's not the news. The news is that the fertility rates and the population growth in Europe is static. In some places it's in the negative. Countries like France, like Italy, you may have read, they are already living in towns and cities that cannot be accommodated. The people are dying, They are not being replaced. Some houses are empty, and some villages, they have to collect villages and move them to one village so that they can have enough children to put in a school, or move hospitals together. So basically that population is beginning to die. Another 25 years, the average age, what they call the mean age, in Europe is going to be between 30 and 40. Most of it. So Europe is aging. Its population is not growing. If you go to Asia, Asia is still growing, but the percentage of growth is very small. So projection in the next 25, 50 years, Asia is also going to be aging. And the only continent where you have a young, vibrant population is going to be Africa. The mean age is going to be 19. In Nigeria, the actual country mean age in 2050 is going to be 14, which makes it even longer than the average for Africa. What are the implications of this? It means that the big companies, even though they are increasing automation, but you still cannot do without men and women. Europe will have to now get Africans to go there and work and keep their society alive. And what does that also mean? It means that the economy of Europe is going to be loaded by retirees, old people, old age, and they have to be paying. And that means the economy is going to go down. It's going to be consumed by these older people who are not working, but they are taking pension, they are taking hospital care, they are taking this, they are taking that. So the economy in the next 25 years is going to be in trouble. Those of you who are able to go to UK in the last few months, you have seen how terrible European economy is. It's really dipping down. I mean, it's expensive, everybody is complaining and so many things. But this is just the beginning. It's going to get worse with time. So Asia is booming, but Asia is going to start aging. So what it means in the next 25, 50 years, Africa is the continent of the century. It's the engine of growth. It's the place where things can be done. It's going to be a young economy, a young population, a young million with a lot of vibrant energy. So Africa is going to be the place to go to or to look at when we are looking at, in the next, in terms of population growth. I've got the figures here. I don't want to spend too much time on them. Africa is known for rare earth minerals. This is outside gold, a lot of things, even outside lithium. Now the interesting thing is that we who are Nigerians, I'm just using Nigeria here in Africa, but it applies to all Africans, we don't even know what we have. Our government is not be able to build the capacity to be able to lead, to do seismic surveys. If you have a seismic survey that will go down on the ground and tell you the kind of rocks and this and that and fresh water reservoirs that you have to go to Europe or you have to go to Asia. We don't have that capacity. I'm not sure, maybe South Africa, but I'm not sure there's any African country with the capacity to lead. I give you an example. When I was in government, I was special advisor to the Vice President on political affairs. I was representing in the Boundary Commission. And we came in 1999, there was the Bakassi problem. The Bakassi problem is not a problem from between Nigeria and Cameroon. No, it's from the French who are creating the problem. And the issue is not the land. They wanted everybody to believe is the land between this Akwa Ibom or one of these states. But the French wanted to steal. So our European lawyers told us, this is not about land, forget about the Bakassi. If you concede Bakassi, a line is going to be drawn from Bakassi that goes straight into the sea that will take away all this oil that we have. And it's the French that are going to suck that oil and benefit from it. So we were advised to do a fast track, because the thing has been in the International Court of Justice for like almost 20 years. So the first thing to do is to now do your own boundary commission, maritime boundary commission, between you, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Príncipe. Once you do that, you deposit it in the International Court of Justice, because 2 or 3 countries have already agreed. One country would not matter, then you'll be given a judgment and you would have secured your oil. So we started the boundary commission. We'll go to Equatorial Guinea, we'll go to Sao Tome, then we'll come here, we'll go to London, we'll meet with our lawyers here and there. So eventually we do a boundary, but there was one particular line that we couldn't change, because it has to pass over a block, an oil block. And we did not know that oil block has already been given to ExxonMobil. So we went to Atlanta. We got into their satellite room and they searched their satellite until they located the coordinates of that particular oil block. And they presented us with a 3D picture of that oil block. And you can see the total quantity of oil lying under the sea. And it was there, the calculations were done, and the boundary was drawn. Nigeria knew how much percentage it would get from ExxonMobil, and the Equatorial Guinea knew how much percentage. Now that tells you, we are sitting here, but since we are only God knows what is in, on this land here. But you see, the Chinese, the South Koreans, the Americans, they know exactly. And recently, an Asian company that was looking for lithium, they were in Misra and in Bauchi, where there was a lot of lithium. And even that, through my association with them, I discovered that when they come looking for lithium is always found along with nickel. So they will not declare nickel, they will pay for lithium. You don't know that nickel is there because you don't have the equipment, you don't have the capacity. You have not built the capacity to know. So they will buy lithium, but they will carry all their nickel. And nickel is more expensive than the lithium they are buying. But what was interesting, their MD was coming to visit, and they said they wanted to see me. He met, but the manager who was here, I was asking them, when is he coming, where and where they are going. I assume they will be going to West Bauchi and Nasarawa. He said no. When he came, he said, look, yes, we are here for lithium, but it's not lithium alone that we are looking for. We are looking for this and this and this rare earth. And it is found in this and this and this place. And you will be interested to know they came to Katsina. Because there is a rare earth mountain here that is so critical to defense industry that I don't think even the Nigerian government knows. I will search the name and include it in the so that people who want to, because I searched it. It's always found in the Akida Marmara. You know, this particular salt formation is inside Marmara. Now I'm making this point just to say that when you talk about mineral and rare earth metals, they know exactly. They know the quantity of water that we have. I'll come to that, I think. Yeah, water crisis. They know everything. We need to know. But Africa, the point I want to make is that Africa has what the world needs for the next 100, 200, maybe 300 years. We have it. Then know it, and they are planning for it. And every conflict that you see, my local government here in Libya, in Savannah, another Mutumina, Masu Sarauta Savannah, all these conflict areas, it tells you that there is a very, very important metal on the ground. You won't find any conflict if there is no metal on the ground that they are interested in. So all these things are created. They are all construed and they are benefiting. We are sleeping, we don't have equipment, we don't know what they are, only God knows what they are taking. I don't know how many have gone to Congo Kinshasa. Okay. I was opportune to go as a government officer, but when you go in government protocol, you don't see much. Later on, a friend who was a company took me to Congo, and I saw a Congo that I did not see as an official of government, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And Congo is the richest country in Africa. Some say it's the richest country in the world. I saw things that were mind-blowing, and I still feel the pain. We get from the airport, we are taken to the Hilton. When we get into Hilton, it's like the Metropolitan Hilton in London. There is no difference. Everything, neat, nice, everything functioning. Then the meal we eat is the same taste of the Hilton Metropolitan in London. Everything is Hilton. The moment we step out, we are entirely in a different country. The sights are terrible. We got out 7 o'clock in the morning. The people, the citizens of Congo coming out were looking like they were coming from the cave. Their clothes wrinkled, their face gloomy, and they were eating akara and this kosei and these pieces of food on the roadside. And in that same country, they have God knows what, but rhodium. I was a meeting with some of the Congolese mineral officials, and we were looking at rhodium, and somebody said rhodium, half a container of rhodium is selling in world market at 1.9 billion US dollars, almost 2 billion US dollars. Just half a container of rhodium. And this rhodium, they are picking it. I'm not sure they are paying for it. If they are paying for it, they are paying pittance. And we were to go back our second trip. The day we were to, 10 days before we leave, we were now to go to fly into, not Kinshasa, into Goma. From Goma we go to Kisangani. Kisangani is the area of the mining where you have rhodium and others. And that was exactly 10 days to the time when M23 invaded Goma, took over the airport, and that was the trip we did not make. But following the news, some of you would have remembered, America sent a message that they are prepared to come and solve the problem of the M23 Congo on condition that they will be given the first right of choose the sites they want to get minerals. Nobody like. I mean, they said it without missing words. It was written verbally. It's not like something hidden under the carpet. Now, a bit of Congo is taking place here already, but we just simply don't care to even see. And only God knows how much they are taken away. So the point, so that we don't make the point I'm making, is that Africa, anticipating the future, has the most important role to play in the world, in the future, in this particular area of rare earth metals. Two more things. Water crisis. There is World Water Report that is issued in December every year. This world water, because they follow, they monitor the amount of fresh water available in the world. I'm okay. Don't worry, I'm okay. This world water report tells you how much water is available in the world every year. I give you a context. January last year, I was in an international meeting. People came from America, from Eastern Europe, Asia. A small meeting, not a gathering like this. Most of them former foreign ministers, former vice presidents, top thinkers. We were looking at a world of Trump and what is likely to happen in the coming few years. In that meeting, everything that has taken place in the last 1 year, also the attack on Iran and this and that, were all laid out. I was to write a paper on Africa. I presented my paper, and in the discussions, I made reference to the World Water Report. And I said, according to the World Water Report, and you can Google this and you can see the report, you can read it. He said that there will be world water crisis in 2050. The largest water reservoir in the world is Lake Florence, fresh water, is Lake Florence in Canada, followed by the Lake Michigan in the US, followed by a lake in southern Siberia, followed by another lake in around Iraq, the old Mesopotamia. And then they went on and on and on. And then they said that when the crisis comes, the only continent that will have sufficient water and will be able to even supply the world with fresh water is the continent of Africa. Now, this is where the relevance of Africa comes. Now, it's interesting. In my paper, I made reference to the conflict in Central Africa, the anti-Balaka. Some of you remember 20-25 years ago, there were attacks on Muslim communities. A lot of them have moved into Chad. Up to now, they are still in Chad. And then the American delegation, one of them said, we have made reference of anti-Balaka. We have made reference to the world water crisis, but you have not linked the two. He said, let me link them for you. He said the anti-Balaka movement was a CIA operation. And what informed that operation? Because they realized in 2050 there was being crisis, they read these reports. And in 2050, Central Africa, and they don't know, they are sitting under fresh water, underground fresh water, that is 10 times the size of Lake Michigan. So they knew that in 2050 they will be coming to look for water. And then they looked at the demographics. What did they see? They saw that in 2050 Muslims' population will be about 70-75%. So they formed the government. So when they form the government, you have to negotiate with Muslims. It's going to be tough, it's going to be difficult. We don't know what type they are. So what do we do? Let us disrupt the demographic growth so that by 2050 they will not be the majority. We will not be able to negotiate, we get our water. Now this is the strategic thinking. Because they plan, they think ahead. I ask myself sometimes, who is thinking for this country? Who is planning for us? And there are lots of these and these and these and these. And because we have a bunch of idiots leading us, nobody is even thinking about getting an office, getting experts, giving them a small amount of money just to now concentrate, focus, and give them this report. All they want is steal money, build a house in Dubai, another one in London, take their children to Oxford and Cambridge and this and that and that. And then to what effect? It is fun. So, we have the potential of providing the world with fresh water. And that fresh water is going to be much worse than the petrol that we are all talking about now. Because you can find alternatives for petrol, isn't it? All the wealth in this part of Africa was in the Sahel. There were the commercial centers, the trade centers, all the wealth was there. And Sahel was peaceful. The Europeans came, what did they do? They emptied the wealth in the Sahel and they took it to the sea. Right? If you want to do this now, you have to go to Lagos. Isn't it? I mean, that's where the big money, the business, the blue economy and the rest of it. So we don't lose the point. The fact is that we cannot have peace in the Sahel until we fix the Sahelian economy. At the moment, the economy that is raging is a war economy. It's economy that survives on conflicts. This is why even if you kill all the villages, new ones will grow because we have not fixed the economy that provides you the peace that you are looking for. Now, but the point here, so that we don't lose it, is that what is economy in the next 25 years looking like? The economy that's going to be sustainable is what is called the knowledge economy. So, Africa can only survive and thrive if we can develop our own knowledge economy. Knowledge economy is an economy that is based on skilled labor. So we have to build skills. It's an economy that is based on innovation. So we have to innovate. Not just repeat what other people are doing. Knowledge economy is based on information and communication technology, ICT. So we have to develop our digital infrastructure. Knowledge economy is going to rely on institutional regimes, meaning there has to be policies and regulations and incentives for a certain type of entrepreneurship that will protect intellectual property. Now all these are things that we require to play the role. So, in conclusion, I'm raising this issue to make 3 points. One, African world, Africa has learned and in so many ways. I've not mentioned everything, I just picked from many things that are there to illustrate the point that Africa has actually served the world well. So that idea of Africa being backward or being kind of a niche is not true. It's a European fiction, and we have to correct that. Two, Africa is the continent of the future. The world is going to be relying in Africa for its rare earth metals, for its minerals, for its manpower, for its water, for you can go on and on and on. The third point is what I want to conclude with. How do we produce the young men and women who in 25 years will be the leaders who will be negotiating with these people, who will develop the necessary skills to give Africa that leadership, that will protect its wealth, that will lead its people to a good life, and that will actually take its place, which nature has endowed it with and given it, a role particular to play. Now, this is the job of university teachers. It's the work of universities and polytechnics to produce the skills, to produce the mental framework, to give them the self-esteem. Because the average graduate today, he graduates always looking for a job. He does not know the potential that Africa has. He does not even know that in 25 years' time, Africa will be the place to go. He is not preparing for that because he doesn't know. This course is not taught in the university as far as I know. So, really, we have a job to do, and I hope we live up to it. And I thank you for this political behavior. You are such a hard work.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let us acknowledge and appreciate our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Usman M. Bugaji, for that insightful and thought-provoking presentation. May we give him another well-deserved round of applause, please. We shall now move to the next item on our program, which is questions, comments, and response. Thank you. Questions.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The comment I'm going to make here is that the person who raised the citation of the lecturer, I don't know whether it is deliberate or he was informed to steal the early education of professor. He only he graduated from place to that without mentioning his primary education, without mentioning his secondary education. This comment I'm going to make. Why I'm making this comment is because you are distorting his history. Except he deliberately made points to make everybody aware that I've got a place in history for him. In 1958, I joined him at secondary school. He was in Form 3, I think. We are in the same hostel, building house. We are also in the same room, on 3. So try not to skip or distort his own history. I happen to be a much junior, as he mentioned here. When we were in secondary school, he was much senior. He was in Form 3 and I was in Form 1. And unfortunately, Sunday, this professor was in Form 1 while I was in 5. She said, "I don't see them now. God bless you. Give me a bless. Thank you."
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, let me thank Madam for the very insightful and thought-provoking lecture. This is really very refreshing. I wanted to signal to Madam that we still have a lot of time, because really I wasn't tired listening. But then when I looked at my watch, I saw we are approaching one. I said, well, we'll have to let Madam rest. I will ask one question just by the way, and then I will make just a few comments. I have 3 copies of the Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun, which I have kept in different places in my house by Kaduna, so that I wouldn't lose all of them. The book is translated by Rothensal. I don't know if perchance Muslim has ever come across the original version and could to some extent confirm whether the translation by Rothensal has remained consistent with the ethos of the original. This is just because I know Madam is well more research than I am. My comment, I look back at history and I see how obvious it is that Africa's problem started with the colonization. Because colonization disrupted the natural evolution of our political, social, and economic systems. But apart from the governance, it also brought brutal stealing from our resources. For many years, and Malam said they are still planning to steal more and more. Our governments were dislodged and replaced with a strange, alien, and incompatible colonial administration. And that's why today Africa is still struggling. We have inherited a democracy that has obviously failed to work in Nigeria and in many African countries. Now also, I feel that what has disrupted Africa the most, from my understanding of Muhammad's presentation, in spite of our pivotal and defining roles in the emergence of human civilization, many of which Madam has clearly elucidated, showing many instances. I think what has disrupted Africa is the collapse of our ivory towers and the erosion of intellectualism. Although Nigeria, I think if you do a small search, is one of the countries with the highest number of PhDs. Most of us have failed to do what the philosophy degree have naturally enabled us to do. That is to interrogate existing knowledge. You can see how scholars like Malam, in spite of their age, they are still busy interrogating what has been pushed to us. And they are speaking to the truth. We have had to ask fundamental questions about our history, and more importantly, concerning our relationship with the West. This is very, very important. Our scholars and our leaders have become inundated by what I will call a debilitating, mental slavery. Japan, when I was a student of contemporary world history in 1987, I was told that Japan closed its borders for 220 years to develop its distinct identity, refined culture, and unique social order untouched by Western powers and Western civilization. And that is why Japan is what it is today. By the time they opened their borders, the West was shocked with what Japan was able to do during that period. For Nigeria and the rest of Africa, if we can't close our borders today, we can close our minds, free our minds, organize our thoughts, and exert some amount of independence as well as demonstrate confidence in what we can do as Africans. And I think that is what Malam has spent almost 3 hours talking to us today. I hope we have listened, and I hope young minds here will go away regurgitating what Malam has said and probably take some resolutions as to how we can move Nigeria and the rest of Africa forward. Thank you very much, Madam. And we look forward to seeing you in our community again. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to start by commending the organizers and the paper presenter. My name is Shamsuddin Abdurrahman. I was privileged to have been mentored by the presenter. I worked previously as his personal assistant, and I'm happy to be here. My comment was, the presenter has effectively covered the field in a very good way. My own question was, sir, since we are talking about anticipation for the future, Nigeria and Africa as a whole have signed what is called the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. However, for the sake of the future and particularly the economic development of Africa and Nigeria, that after that's the treaty called African Free Trade Continental Agreement still seems not to be working, because it is more expensive to travel within Africa. It is more expensive to trade within Africa. I know the presenter has once chaired the House Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs while he was a parliamentarian. So I would like to hear your thoughts pertaining how our leaders in the future will fully implement the African Free Trade Continental Agreement towards ensuring that the economy of Africa flourish. Because really the borders, the xenophobic attacks we are seeing in South Africa and all are all a setback for the continent. And with the implementation of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement, if at all it's implemented, it will go a long way towards ensuring that there's free trade and movement of persons and goods within the African continent. My last comment borders on democracy. The Vice Chancellor has touched on it, but I want to say that we have been implementing the Western style democracy, which I think it has helped us. We have seen it from the First Republic to this present republic that we are in. At the same time, we have seen where we are today. Is it the view of the presenter that we look more inwards to see how we can have a kind of democracy that reflects our socio-cultural background in Africa? Because we have seen countries like Rwanda, we have seen where they were before and where they are now, and somehow they have been at the forefront of criticism by the Western countries irrespective of the type of democracy that they practice. But Alexander Pope said, for forms of government, let who's content, what is administered best is best. Today, Rwanda is a bastion in Africa where everybody chooses to go. I thank you for your attention. These are my 2 comments. Thank you very much. The guest speaker, that permit me to stand an already established protocol. I am Professor Jibril Hussein. I teach at the Department of History and World Studies, Nigerian Defense Academy. I would like to comment on the last point posed by this speaker, that Africa, issues that have to do with conflict in Africa today. We gave a reference with the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I would like to bring our attention to Northern Nigeria in particular. Northern Nigeria has a peculiar issue with regard to the westernmost section of the area. It is an area that has a large population of Muslims in the world. As such, there are a lot of conspiratorial policies introduced in this region. And unfortunately, the people of northern Nigeria, more especially the core north, or the area we today refer to as northwest geopolitical zone, the largest area of the Sokoto Caliphate, there are a lot of problems, particularly this banditry issue. As a student of history that has interest on conflicts and defense studies, I perceive some fresh challenges that are confronting this part of the country or this part of the world. Even if today we are able to mitigate the menace of armed banditry, there is the issue of the project of what is done as House Walla. It's a project introduced by some people, largely sponsored from outside of the area and even the country, to try to create conflict between the Hausa and Fulani who have been living together for the past 600 years. It is impossible to be able to decide more than 85% of the people living in the north of Nigeria to be able to tell whether I am true Fulani or I am true Hausa. As I'm speaking, my mother is a Fulani woman and I cannot speak Fulani, and to that extent my relatives are Fulani, but Fulani to be precise, that cannot speak Fulani. Now, if an average person who is not aligned to, when you look at the social media, what is being expressed, if you look at the cost, the abuse that the sponsors of this project are instigating young people doing, you cry. So I'm insinuating that if nothing is not done by probably the government of the Northwest, even after the banditry, there is going to be a serious challenge. The next challenge, sir, is this. The issue in international relations, there are many theories. The conspiracy theory of international relations, there is theory and so on and so forth. It is a kind of, if a country, a bigger country has an interest in a smaller country, they can go in directly or indirectly to bring something that they can take attention of the large population in order to come and take their own interest there. There is an emerging issue of the seizure of logs in this part of the country by some group of people. Recently, Kasala Post and social media platforms brought out a conflict in Antogoro, one town in Antogoro here, in which the villagers heard that some people from outside of the country are financing the construction of mosques to different Muslim groups, after which they will allow you to continue to be worshiping in that mosque. But after it is done, then some set of people will now drop in and say that they completely take over that mosque. And it is not only in Kaduna, it is almost in the northwest Nigeria. The people that are in this project, they don't know that they are being used by some people outside in order to come to create a peace conflict. Or peace and telling us, if care is not taken, even if this can also pose a new threat to us. And finally, there is a serious issue of that will bring conflict to us, and it is associated with us, and we are not taking it into cognizance. That is the issue of indiscipline with our children. I am a visiting professor at the Department of International Relations, Airport Institute of Technology, Kaduna. And getting there are many students, children, Yoruba and so on and so forth. Wallahi Azim, if you look at the most indisciplined students are our children, the children of the House of Life. When you are doing lecture, you now tell the student that in my class, I don't want to hear that phone rings. I don't want to hear this and that. Immediately we turn to write on the matchboard. You hear story when we turn back, you see some ladies holding you in hijab or in Bele. But those children of the other tribes, if you are conducting lecture, they will listen keenly as if you are in a church doing sermon to them. They respect you, even when you go by car to find someone different. Okay, so these are the three challenges that Nigeria belongs to over 250 ethnic groups. It does not belong to only our children. We have to think, we have to go back. The morality, the discipline that we are knowing in history of the Sokoto Caliphate, we have to go back to it. All of us here that are serving in different capacities, we are well trained, well groomed by our parents. But unfortunately that today, we don't want our children. Thank you very much.
We're going to take only 2 questions or comments because of prayer time. Thank you. Just 2. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, guest speaker. Baba, for this wonderful, well-articulated, refreshing lectures. Really thank you very much. Your lecture has actually brought a challenge to most of us in social science and even in science, that regardless of the field of your study, there is need for us to know history. History needs to be part of every one of us. Your lecture, sir, has actually made me tell of 3 things. One, I am proud to be an African, a black man, and above all, going back to the role Islam played in the world existence has actually made me to be proud to be a Muslim. Now, your lecture has made me to understand that the so-called White House is to be, a black house. I think that shows how Islam and Muslim has played their own role in the world existence. Now, the question I have, sir, in your opening remarks, you raised very important, even though it's not your central focus, but the debatable issue you raised concerning whether Nigeria is a secular state or not. Now, sir, can you shed light why Nigeria is not a secular state? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The presenter, University Kano. Sir, I will begin by the first question you raised about whether we think about the next 25 years. You said that our politicians only think for the next 4 years. I think the problem lies with this particular basic historical questions of why, how, when. And I can assure you now, with the return of history into our curriculum at primary and secondary school level, that particular problem in the next 25 years will definitely change. Because if you look at the trend, majority of our people are lacking in terms of history. That is why even the comment by Professor Jibril it had to do with the history itself. And then my 2 quick observations or questions are, I want you to highlight more about this issue of Arabization, particularly during the reign of the Umayyad period. That is when Umar Abdulaziz instituted the policy of Arabization in the entire Arab world. And then the other question is, I want you also to highlight on how the Protestant movement, that is the Reformation, issued the era of Industrial Revolution and making England as a model in terms of development in entire Europe. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I think you should be the last person. I'm sorry, you wanted to ask questions before me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Ibrahim Lal from the Department of Microbiology. Mr. Presenter, thank you very much for insightful and stimulatory presentation. Mine is just a suggestion going by what was presented. Looking at peculiarity of our university and the TAP, Islamic University in Nigeria, I want to suggest the management to at least look at the possibility of introducing some courses. For example, a general study course can be introduced with the title Contribution of Africa to World History. And then again, as we are Muslims, and then the pride we have that our university is the first Islamic university in Nigeria, I think the university can really introduce a course like Islamic philosophy to be a general course, so that we as Muslims and the students we are teaching can appreciate the contribution of our Islamic scholars. Thank you very much.
Over to you, sir. Thank you. So you can sit down. Okay, thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Let me start with something that we have not raised. I've noticed that there has been a lot of questions and answers. But there was not a single voice of our sisters. Now, I want to make this observation because I think sisters, you have to reconsider the role we are playing as Muslims. When I spoke about the first, second and third university, it's important that you know that the first university, the Qarawiyyin, was built by a woman, Fatima al-Fili. The second university of Al-Azhar was built in honor of a woman, Sayyidatuna Fatima. The third university of Sankore was built by a Bambara businesswoman. This was the role that women played. So they were not busy marrying of their daughters and singing and dancing. They were scholars. So please change your perspective. Don't sit down there and just the Muslim. You are supposed to be an active participant of building the Muslim community. So please, next time I hope there will be more participation. Let me start. I'm not sure if time will allow me to go on through. Muqaddimah, the official version was the 3 volumes that he was also the one published copy. Up to now, from my little understanding, is the best in terms of language and clarity. Why? Because the Muqaddimah is picking on very subtle philosophical concepts. I have seen other translations done by, I think, Pakistanis. I'm sure the people who understand the Arabic very well, but their grasp of the English language is poor. So it did not quite convey the if you like, the more subtle ideas. So up to now is the most standard. Certainly, if you are able to read the Arabic, you will be able to see gaps even within Prophet's translation. Because when he speaks about the Quran, when you translate, there are limitations of the English language itself within the translation. The Quran is the universe. Now, the universe in English and the Quran in Arabic or Islamic philosophy are slightly different. The Quran is broader, it's wider. It includes Alim al-Ghayb, which in Western European languages, because that concept is not there, cannot be captured in any particular language. So yes, there are gaps. But these are work in progress. I'm hoping if we pay attention to that, we'll soon get a translation that is richer than that of Rafinsel. You said there are a lot of PhDs, but no avail. Now this is a critical point. I'm not going to raise that. I wanted to raise it right here, but I thought I had dragged it for too long and I don't want to tire you out. I think this is critical. If there is one question I would want to answer, actually, is this one. You see, in the abstract I sent, I raised the issue of decolonization of knowledge and indigenization of knowledge. Without decolonization, we cannot have progress. And even the point Shams raised about democracy is not working. Are we thinking of customizing our democracy to our social cultural environment? Are we thinking of reinventing it in our own context? This cannot happen unless we have decolonization of knowledge. And how do you decolonize? And somebody, I can't remember now, who talked about being a proud African. You see, you have to decolonize the mentality for the individual to know that he can make equal or even better contribution to life. The way the colonial curriculum has trained us, Europe remains the ultimate in wisdom and perfection. We are just trying to measure up to Europe. Everything of ours is benchmarked on Europe. Now, a decolonized mind will question the standards of Europe and will aim at a higher standard. And therefore, will be more creative, will be more innovative, will be more independent, and will be more targeting the real problems that the society has. So this is something that we need to, maybe courses like this and more can help us to begin the process of decolonization. How do we indigenize knowledge? The last person who spoke, I think, is from microbiology. In the 90s, I think early 90s, I was invited to give a talk to Islamic Medical Association in Sokoto. So when I was talking to the organizers, I said, okay, what exactly would you be interested? They were bringing all sorts of topics. I said, okay, as medical students or students of pharmacy, has anybody talked to you about the books of medicine written by Sokoto scholars? They said they have never had anything. I said, okay, I'm going to speak about that. So I gave a talk on the contributions of Sokoto scholars to medicine. I took just 12 manuscripts, 1 or 2 or 3 from Shehu, 1 or 2 or 3 from Damle, 1 or 2 or 3 from Abdullahi Danfoji. And that of Abdullahi, or one of the works from Abdullahi, talked about preventive medicine. He spoke about that we have heard our friends finish their secondary school, they go to the university, they do not know that they have indigenous knowledge which can be more effective. For example, a lot of the drugs that we consume, I can tell you as a pharmacist, nearly half of them are poisons. Especially now when we get, our Igbo citizens bringing drugs from India and China, which is substandard, which we have more diseases created by the drugs we eat, we consume, than actually the sicknesses. Nobody is doing this research. Of course, NAFDAC has said 70% of our drugs are imported. I think it's more than 70. How much drugs I spoke to the Northeast governors. I said, Northeast is one zone of the country that does not have a single pharmaceutical industry, not even producing Panadol. This is a serious thing. No country, because the Northeast, if you put them together, are the size of Portugal in terms of population. In terms of the space, they have more space than Portugal. And can you imagine a state like Portugal if there is no pharmaceutical industry of any kind? But that's what we have. You have a population of the size of a European country and they do not even produce Panadol. How much does it take to produce Panadol? When we are being trained as pharmacists, all the drugs, what they call over-the-counter drugs, non-prescription drugs, that were consumed by the hospitals in Malin, by the hospital in Valley, and the one in Baroduko, were produced by ABU itself. We were the students who were trained in that factory. So we can see that this is all part of the need for decolonization and indigenization. I wish I can speak more on this, but time will not allow. I hope I have addressed the issue. Maybe I can add. You see, we have a lot of intellectuals, but intellectuals need to ask themselves, what is really the role of